Hi, everyone. Today we're going to take a look, it might take a couple of installments to get through this, but we're going to take a look at some of the pre-French Revolution conditions that are going to help to lead us down the path to that revolution. And we want to make sure that we're able to explain political, economic, social, religious, any intellectual, specifically in terms of the Enlightenment, any way that you can try to differentiate between the different causes of the French Revolution itself. That'll give you kind of a nice little scope to go through this unit. So we first have to start with the American Revolution. And the American Revolution, just a brief refresher here, is can basically be boiled down to how the colonies are viewed. The British are going to look at the colonies as a license to print money. They look at the colonies as you do what we tell you to do, and if we're feeling magnanimous, we'll throw some things your way, but ultimately you are there to serve us. The colonists, on the other hand, view themselves as British citizens. They believe that they are entitled to the same rights and the same privileges that anyone living in London would be able to enjoy as well. And this is where we get the no taxation without representation and all that good stuff from, because of that difference in viewpoint. How the French get involved in all of this and how this ends up affecting France is that you have some people arguing there's a finance minister, his name is Turgot, and Turgot is saying, you know, King Louis XVI, we don't have the money for this, but his political advisor, Vergennes, who is somebody that he's come to grow and trust in, Vergennes is saying, no, this is our chance to kick the British in the pants. We just lost our North American colonies. This is a great opportunity for us to help out the Americans and bloody the nose of the Brits a little bit here too. This is where the Marquis de Lafayette comes in. Obviously, King Louis XVI sides with them. Some helpful prodding by Benjamin Franklin, real man of the people. The people in Paris absolutely love Benjamin Franklin, to the point where he's always famous for wearing kind of this almost like a raccoon skin hat that he wears, almost like a pelt on his head, a real commoner's hat. And it becomes a fashion statement in Paris thanks to the fame of Benjamin Franklin. And a woman actually gives him a walking stick that has a cap on the top of it that has this cap placed on there. And Benjamin Franklin will give that to George Washington as a gift and almost like a reminder, hey, as you are president, just remember where you came from, those humble beginnings. So that's just kind of a neat anecdote. The Marquis de Lafayette comes in. He and Washington become fast friends. Then there's a whole Hamilton musical that comes out of this. Je m'appelle Lafayette, the Lancelot of the Revolutionary Set. This is where he comes into play. Everybody's dancing around and stuff, and I don't know, something like that. The Marquis de Lafayette is going to be a powerful figure because he brings these ideas of the Enlightenment from France over, and then he's going to bring some of those ideas of the American Revolution back with him. And he will be a prominent figure within the French Revolution, especially the early stages. So what is the influence of the American Revolution? First, we have the Declaration of Independence. That obviously plays a major role. You'll see in the readings, if you're making your way through the readings of the French Revolution, is really going to have an impact on some of the writings that are done during this time period as well. In addition, we also have kind of these people who are going to be influenced, and we got to consider who is going to be listening and watching and paying attention to the moves that the American colonists are making. And it's really going to be your third estate. It's going to be the upper crust of your third estate, and then it's going to be the second estate. The upper crust of that third estate, we're going to call them the bourgeoisie. Now, it's important to note, the bourgeoisie, and that's, so in essence, these people over here. The bourgeoisie, if we think about it in Marxist terminology, the bourgeoisie is who owns the means to production, and the proletariat are the workers, and blah, blah, blah. We're not there yet. Okay, that's 1848. So we're not there yet. The bourgeoisie in this case, we're talking about educated members of the upper part of the third estate, merchants, traders, et cetera. And again, we'll get into the system a little bit more in a minute. But those are the people that I'm mentioning here. These people are learning. These are the way that these people are learning, the way that the bourgeoisie is getting together is through these salons. You participated in one. These salons are where Enlightenment ideals can be expressed and can be talked about in real terms. And now that the American Revolution hits, people are looking around like, oh, this isn't just a theoretical experiment anymore. This isn't just a thought process. These ideas, these concepts have real-world applications. The United States is going to eventually ratify a constitution in 1789, obviously we're not there yet, where it's separated into three branches of government that Montesquieu talks about. So there are real-world applications to this, and this is being carried out, discussed through these salons all across France. And that's going to help to bring us to the French Revolution. We see the dissemination of information changing more so than ever before as a result of this. So the French are really going to start to ramp things up as we get into the next couple of lectures. We need to start here with what is known as the Ancien Regime. And the Ancien Regime, we're looking at ancient regime, right? The ancient way that things worked. And it was this traditional three-estate system that is in part based on feudalism. Those who prayed at the top, those who fought in the middle, and then those who worked at the bottom. But within these estates, we are seeing that growing, I hesitate to call it a middle class because it's really not, but this growing bourgeoisie. Now with this bourgeoisie, they are looking to buy their way. They're looking to move from the third estate into the second estate so they can enjoy some of the privileges that the second estate has that we're going to touch on here in a bit. How is it constructed? So again, we're talking Roman Catholic clergy, thanks to Louis XIV, really doing an absolutist job of trying to make Catholicism the main religion of France. We have the second estate, about 2% of the population owns about 20% of the land, and then we have the third estate, and these are made up of various groups within each of these estates. As we look at how these three estates are working together to create what is France during the late 1700s, we see how they make up population and taxation, and you can see obviously there is a real discrepancy between them in terms of land ownership, in terms of taxation and population. We'll get into, it's basically a regressive tax. The more you make, the less you pay in taxes, as opposed to a progressive one. Here's another image that will show us something similar, just in a different format. Very, very similar, but again, talking about the differences between those three estates, I'd make sure that you know these charts and understand how they work, but again, I will touch on those through the next few slides. Nice little political cartoon here. We have the first and second estate as well as the king riding atop the third estate, blood, choking, bloody hands, bloody knees, as he is carrying the people of the Ancien Regime. Title here, The People of the Ancien Regime. So the first estate, this is the clergy. These are your religious workers. We have the high clergy. These are your top dogs, your fat cats, your bishops, your archbishops, people that are making legitimate money off of the tithes, who are able to live very, very comfortably. And a quick note, most of these men are in some ways related to the monarchy, not necessarily true relations, but are appointed by them. If you think way back, way back, we have this initial argument that's going to kind of kick off the Great Schism, is who is in charge of church policies within France? Is it the Pope or is it the King of France? And that argument eventually results in the King of France taking some of that power away from the Pope. We're moving more secularly in terms of government. So the king is able to appoint people to those high church positions. The king is going to use that to curry favor with nobles and families and that kind of thing. Then you have the low clergy, and the low clergy lived a not glamorous life, really much at all. Living day to day, they don't live in excess. These are your local priests. These are people who maybe don't even have enough money to have enough prayer books for all of their parishioners. Less than 1% of the population is a member of the clergy, about 10,000 people. They own 5 to 10% of the land, though, and that's where a lot of the First Estate's wealth comes from, because they are not taxed on the land. And if you'll recall, a physiocrat idea is that wealth is tied to the land. The land development for agricultural, then taxation, how it is used is where wealth is derived from, as opposed to the mercantilist policies that said the wealth is derived from bullion. No taxes on person or land. Now, every 5 to 10 years, they did contribute a large sum of money to the French monarchy, but ultimately, they are not taxed with any regularity. They're also not really accountable to the laws. They kind of have their own systems in place, and should there be some sort of discrepancy, it would be discussed by the higher-ups of the Catholic Church with the monarchy or with a minister of some kind. The second estate, these are your fancy people. These are your nobles. And there are two different groups within the nobility. There's the nobility of the sword, which is your old money. These are people who, according to the ancient laws of feudalism, fought for the king and were given inheritances and lands and fiefs that as a reward for their service to the king. Then you have the nobility of the robe, and they are the new nobility. This is the nouveau riche, to use kind of a Gatsbyan concept here. They purchased their position. These offices are called venal offices. Here's what happens. If France isn't taxing, if the monarchy is not taxing the first and second estate all that much, and mostly relying on the third estate, and they don't want to ask for new taxes, because if they ask for new taxes, they have to call the parliament together, which is known as the Estates General, which we'll get into in a later lecture. They don't want to do that because according to the absolutist policies, you wanted to keep the nobles out of decision-making wherever possible so that all the decisions went through you. So you have to raise money somehow. How are you going to do that? Well, you sell offices within the government. These are known as venal offices. And these offices, by the time of the French Revolution in 1789, 75 to 80% of the offices purchased by France, offices of the government are purchased by people who are looking to curry favor. Now, some of these offices came with the entitlements of nobility. So if you're a member of that bourgeoisie looking to move up, you make enough money, you're able to buy your way into the nobility. Most of them. You had to wait like 4 generations before that nobility kicked in, but for some of them, you actually got to become a noble right away if you were willing to get that cash flow into the French economy. Second estate is 1 to 2% of the population, about 400,000 people. They also held all of the jobs within the government and the military, especially the higher up within the military. So when you're talking about some of these absolutist nations like Prussia, who are developing officer schools and developing a meritocracy, that is not France. The people at the top are people who in some cases are completely incompetent, but have inherited their positions within the military from family name. They own 20 to 30% of the land. They live off of the land. They're proud to let the land do their work for them. They rented land, they charged dues, they charged rent to the peasants, and so they were able to make money from the land itself. Almost no taxes, they're exempt from all direct taxes, but if they purchased land that had previously had a tax on it, they did in fact have to pay that tax. So they do have to pay something. It is, however, not what we would think of when we think of ideas like fair share of taxation. And they're not really accountable to the laws. They could avoid laws as they saw fit based on the amount of money, currying of favors, etc. Basically, the top 200 families in France are going to run the entire show. A quick note, the nobility of the sword, a lot of those families have kind of dwindled down in terms of the amount of money they actually have. However, they would then marry the people who are the nobility of the robe so that they could increase their family standing, continue to be a part of the nobility, and continue to live their lavish lifestyles. Just wanted to kind of give you a little bit more about that. We're going to get into the third estate next, but I'm going to stop this video here and pick it up with the next one.